everyone, welcome back to Purple Vice with me, your host, Mans Rowe. Today we're here to talk about the Yellowjackets season finale. So this episode was called Sic Transit Gloria Mundi. Yes, I did have to Google that to get the pronunciation because it's Latin. We're going to talk about the meaning of that phrase, that Latin phrase, and why it was the title for this episode once we get to the end of this. But they definitely left us with plenty of questions to bring us back for season 2. So like last week, I'm not going to do a play-by-play of the entire episode. You guys watched it. You'll probably watch it again. So I'm going to spare everybody the full-blown recap in favor of getting kind of into the weeds and going more analytical with today's breakdown. So I'm only going to talk about what I think you guys are the most interested in after watching the finale. So one of the first scenes in the finale was of the 2021 older versions of Ty, Misty, Shauna, and Nat disposing of Adam's body. So Misty comes by, she tells everybody how they're going to handle it. Everyone seems to accept that, you know, when it comes to this type of thing, apparently Misty is the professional. So I guess it's been established at some other point in the past that she knows what to do when it comes to issues of getting rid of a body. Misty tells Shauna that she's going to be the one to handle cutting up the body since she's the best with a knife. And then Nat says that she'll help her. So Shauna and Nat go into the bathroom. Adam is in the tub. He's still fully dressed, which is kind of interesting. You would think that they would undress him before they start dissecting the body, but they don't. Nat says to Shauna, "Do you remember how to do that?" And Shauna says, "It's just like riding a really gross, fucked up bike." So a couple things with that. One, they're acknowledging that Shauna has actually done this before. And I don't think that they're talking about, hunting and cutting up animals, right? So this just is another indicator that there is eventually going to be cannibalism out in the wilderness in the 96 timeline. Nat and Shauna are having a fairly casual chat while Shauna is using a bone saw to cut up Adam. Nat basically is still kind of on this kick where she thinks Adam was the one who killed Travis. So she's asking Shauna, like, didn't your boyfriend say anything? Or wasn't he acting weird after he killed Travis? It makes sense that Shauna doesn't want Nat to run with this idea that it was Adam who killed Travis, because right now Shauna is trying to pin the things that Jeff did on Adam. But Shauna doesn't believe that Jeff killed Travis, and I don't think that we're supposed to think he had anything to do with that. I don't think he did have anything to do with that. So it makes sense that Shauna is trying to kind of divert Nat away from this line of thinking, and she basically just says to her, like, he probably just killed himself. But it really just struck me how casually they were able to sit there and have a conversation with a dead body right there, let alone a dead body that they were in the process of dissecting, let alone somebody who Shauna had actually dated. So this really shows us how dark of a person Shauna truly is, because, she was kind of falling for Adam. Like, she had a genuine relationship with him, and now here she is sitting next to his dead body that, she murdered him and dissecting him, and she doesn't seem that disturbed or upset by what she's doing. So this really, drives home that these women have done so many things that most people would consider to be beyond the pale and something that no one could ever recover from. And they do it, it's become so commonplace that she's able to do it in a really casual way. So after Shauna and Nat are done dissecting Adam, which luckily we don't see too much more of, she brings a bag out to where Ty and Misty are in the living room, and I think we could assume that was Adam's head in the bag. Gives the bag to Misty, and Misty says that Shauna should hide Adam's torso in the park, and that she will get rid of the rest of it. Basically says, like, well, torsos don't matter. It's only, the hands and feet and head that are distinguishing to a person's identity. Well, obviously we know that Adam had a big ass back tattoo, so that seems like a clear loophole in Misty's logic. So maybe Misty doesn't know that Adam had a big back tattoo, but Shauna probably should have thought of that, because aside from the fact that back tattoo, as many of us have theorized, might indicate some type of relationship with the women who survived the wilderness, it's also a distinguishing feature that could help somebody identify his body. Back in the 96 timeline, the women woke up from their mushroom trip. They were still outside. Everyone's looking confused. I think they're thinking back on the events of the night before and kind of trying to understand how what happened. And then it does come out that Misty poisoned everybody with magic mushrooms when the coach mentions it. Right away, the women all start to turn on Misty, and they're really pissed at her, which is reasonable. And then Jackie comes out of the cabin. She tells all the women that they were acting crazy, that they almost killed Travis. She's calling them out, making them all feel super uncomfortable about their behavior the night before. And then right when everyone's about to get on Misty's case about the fact that it was her fault they were even on mushrooms in the first place, a bear comes and walks into the campground. Now, this bear scene is super weird. Luckily, Shauna had the knife in her hand still, but basically everyone is kind of just like going backwards, trying to get away from the bear, going towards the cabin. They're all really scared, obviously. This is a big-ass bear. And then Lottie tells Shauna to give her the knife, and she starts walking up to the bear, and all the women and the coach are like, no, Lottie, no, are you crazy? And the bear just basically goes down and like acts submissive. He's down, and then Lottie just with one thrust stabs and kills the bear right in front of all the women. So it essentially looked like the bear gave him up for sacrifice. Everyone's looking on like, whoa, what the hell? They all look like they're in shock. Lottie, of course, doesn't seem that shocked. She seemed to somehow know that she was going to have this power over the bear. And this also brought her prophecy of saying that they wouldn't be hungry for long to fruition. So then back in the 2021 timeline, Ty, Nat, and Shauna are all getting ready to go to the reunion after they've just finished disposing of Adam's body. So they've got to do a quick turnaround to get ready for this thing. And then we see they all meet up in the school, like right in front of the doors where they're going to enter the reunion. And there's this moment where they have this like epic walk through the door scene. And then it's really funny because Misty's already there, but she sees them walking in, like, you know, this slow motion cool walk. And then she like quickly leaves what she was doing to go and join them so that she's a part of their like group of four now walking in. Of course, everybody's head is turning, looking at them. They're the Yellowjackets. Everyone knows who they are. They're famous, or maybe infamous is a better word. And, you know, it's just like that funny moment of everybody's noticing them coming in. They know that they're, you know, in the spotlight in this moment too. A couple quick things about the reunion from the scenes before the women actually got there. One, like we see Allie, and Allie was the girl who broke her leg in the first episode. So she never made it on the plane with the rest of her team. So really, like, Ty breaking her leg kind of spared her from having the same fate. She probably would definitely not have survived out in the wilderness by the looks of her. But we see Allie going up to Jeff. She's being super thirsty for his attention, complimenting him, hitting on him. She asks multiple times if Sean is coming. She reminds him that she should have been on the plane. She seems to have this obsession with like kind of being like the yellow jacket that escaped the fate and that could have been there but wasn't. She seems like she really wants to align herself with the history of the team and what they went through, even though she was actually not a victim of what happened to the rest of the team. Then we cut back to 96. There's a scene where we see Van and Ty talking about Van's near-death experience, and she basically says that she was not fully dead, but she wasn't really alive. She was kind of in between, and that when she was kind of almost on death's door, she saw something. There was something out there with them. That's what she says. Whatever she saw has changed her spiritually. We see this at a couple different points throughout the rest of the episode when there's a moment they're all about to eat the bear meat, and she like wants to pray and give thanks to nature for giving them the food. Tells Ty like this is something that's now important to her, and if it's going to be a problem, it might be a problem for them. But Ty tries to reassure her that it's not a problem and that she understands why she feels that way. So I kind of have a theory about this. It kind of seems like the people who die in this wilderness, their souls never leave, right? Because again, later when we see Jackie's scenes, and I'll talk about this in depth when we get there, but she sees Laura Lee, and she also sees a guy kind of hanging out in the corner in the shadows, who many people have theorized, and I agree, is probably the dead cabin guy who was, you know, the body that they found in the attic. It seems like the people who die specifically in that wilderness, or maybe they die trying to escape, their souls are stuck there because, you know, Van says something was out there with us. And then later, Jackie has no reason to see that other guy. It makes sense that she's seeing people she knows, and even Laura Lee, even though she's dead, you know, she would still be somebody whose face Jackie might think of in that moment. But this other figure, there's no reason for her to have the vision of this person. Back at the reunion, Shauna's at the bar getting drinks. Randy starts to talk to her. She threatens him. Then she gets a bunch of shots and brings them over to her table. Misty says she's never done a shooter before, which is kind of sad. Like, yes, I know the girls missed out on a huge part of their childhood by being stuck out in the wilderness, but like, Misty never got to go like out to bars and do shots with her friends even after they got rescued or escaped. It's sad. Something that kind of stood out to me as odd was that there's such an emphasis on Allie. Like, why the show makers really want to kind of shove Allie in our faces, I don't really understand it. She shows a slideshow of different pictures of the team. She's reminding everybody that they all share this like trauma bond from what their class went through. And there's a real big emphasis on highlighting Jackie as, you know, somebody who was there and one of the victims of this horrible event, which again is kind of weird because we know other people died too. Like the coach died, there were girls who died in the plane crash, Laura Lee died, Jackie too, and probably a few others whose deaths we haven't seen yet, but for whatever reason, Jackie is really the one spotlighted. So I guess this kind of goes back to this idea that like Jackie was the cool popular girl. She's the one that they all remember from high school. She was the one that probably would have been, you know, the prom queen or whatever. You know, if she was still around at this reunion, people would have kind of been fawning over her still. So maybe that's the reason why she's the main person highlighted. Because we do see that there are odes to other members of the Yellowjackets. In that scene where Nat is out in the hallway and she's looking at the case where they have like the memorabilia from the team, and there's photos of different people who are on the team. And it's obvious that other people are recognizing the team as a whole, even if Allie is really focused on Jackie. I bet you that like in high school, Allie probably used to kiss Jackie's ass. Like, I don't know. It seems like it all trends, right? And we cut back to the 96 timeline, and this is when things start to take a turn. Jackie, rightfully so, is still calling out the other women on acting crazy, on almost killing Travis. She tells Shauna that like she had a knife to his throat, she would have killed him if she and Nat hadn't stopped him. And then Shauna basically tells her to shut up, and kind of starts to imply that it was Jackie's fault for going off with Travis in the first place. Jackie calls Shauna out and tells everyone that it's actually Jeff's baby that Shauna's pregnant with, and that her best friend was sleeping with her boyfriend behind her back. Instead of like admitting blame or anything, you know, right now the tides have really turned against Jackie. You know, she happens to be right. Everyone was acting super crazy, but because it was everyone else acting that way other than her, they're kind of all banded together in like feeling defensive against her, right? And also she's been pissing people off the whole time by not really pulling her weight. So in this moment, instead of kind of owning up to what she's done, Shauna calls Jackie out, saying that she always controlled her life. She always has gotten everything she wanted in life. Basically, as the kids would say, calling her out for acting like the main character. And Jackie's like, you know, she's totally over it. She's just like, oh, the sidekick's sad, and like really kind of rubs it in, furthering the divide between them, not letting up at all. And then at some point she basically tells Shauna, get out, I can't even look at you. And Shauna's like, well, that's your problem. I'm not leaving the cabin. Why don't you get out? And then right away Mari backs her up and is like, yeah, maybe since we're all so crazy, you should go. At that moment, the coach does try to step in and basically say, nobody's going outside, and like kind of tries to put the kibosh on it. But Lottie is like, stay out of it, coach. And once again, this calls back to kind of what I was talking about last week, where it seems like, coach has totally lost the power in the situation. Yes, he's the only adult, but one, he's outnumbered, and two, because of, you know, his new disability after having lost his leg, his ability to stop them from doing things is pretty limited. So the combination of these things is kind of seeing the women turn against him, and we're seeing that some women in particular are gonna step up and in a threatening way remind him, like, you might be an adult, but you're not in charge here. I won't be surprised if in season 2 we see a faction of these girls go up and finally, you know, completely seize control by killing the coach. Now that Shauna, Mari, Lottie, and some others are kind of insinuating that Jackie's the one that can get the hell out if she has a problem with Shauna, you know, Jackie, being a stubborn teenage girl, is like, all right, you know, when you're in a fight like that, in an argument, you want to win. And sometimes doing the stupid thing and like being the one to walk out and slam the door in that moment might feel like a win. And I think that's kind of why Jackie, you know, just says, you know what, fine. And she walks out of there, and she's thinking like, you know what, I'm going to walk out and they're going to have to come and chase me and beg me to come back. But nobody does. When I was thinking about this, like after having watched the episode, I was like, damn, Jackie's death, first of all, so many people had so many theories about how Jackie was going to meet her end. So we were all pretty sure it was going to happen before the end of the season, but I don't think anyone thought that she would technically die of like natural causes through exposure. But also she kind of like died by teenage girl drama, you know, and stubbornness, because if that argument had never happened, if the girls hadn't ganged up on her, if Shauna hadn't been stubborn enough to not go outside and try to patch things up, if Jackie had not been so stubborn to stay outside even when she was struggling to light the fire and even when she was freezing cold, she wouldn't have died. So literally teenage girl drama led to her death. And on one hand, it is kind of a shame, but I think that if it hadn't gone this way, she would have gone out in a much more brutal fashion. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't think anybody expected her to go out that way. And I'm really interested to see how her death will impact the team's dynamics in season 2, because Shauna's going to have a ton of guilt. We've already seen the beginning of that. But like the whole team and also the coach are kind of complicit. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead because we got a lot more to unpack with the Jackie death scene in the 2021 timeline. There's a lot we could unpack here, but I'm honestly going to skim over most of it. But we have Misty releasing Jessica, kind of broing her out and pretending like she's going with Jessica's plan for them to write a book together, even though, of course, both of them are totally playing each other, right? Misty is playing Jessica, pretending to bro her out, pretending that she's going to give her the whole story. They're going to do a book deal together. Jessica's pretending to go along with that, pretending to be Misty's friend and to be into that idea, while obviously just trying to get the hell out of there, escape, and probably call the police as soon as possible, I'm guessing. I'm sure she has no plan to continue ahead with a deal with Misty after she's been held hostage by her, but they're both kind of doing what they think they need to do in this moment to protect themselves. Unfortunately for Jessica, Misty is way ahead of the game. You know, she lets Jess go. She gives her her car key. She's like, oh, I even topped up the wiper fluid and filled your gas tank. Okay. And then Jessica's like, what about my cigarettes? At that point, I was like, it's so obvious what's coming. Come on, Jessica. Never take food, drink, or smoke from Misty Quigley. We see her light up the cigarette. We all knew what was coming. She knew pretty quickly that Misty had drugged her, and right before she kind of like passes out or maybe dies, I'm not sure, she goes, oh, that fucking bitch. She's kind of like, shit, she got me again. So I do think Jessica is dead at this point. Obviously, we can't completely confirm it until season 2, but I don't see why Misty would do that if she wasn't going to poison her and, like, you know, to kill her. Some people might say, well, she could just make it look like she had a DUI and ran off the road or something like that, but I think Jessica's probably dead at this point. So that was a pretty clever plan by Misty, because she would have had a whole nother body to get rid of if she had just killed her herself in her basement, but now she can make it look like, you know, maybe she ran off the road drunk or something like that. So then back in the 96 timeline, one of the things that came up is that Javi is missing. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but I totally called this last week. For those of you who watched, I knew this was coming. The foreshadowing was all there in the imagery. But just to remind you guys, Javi was also tripping on mushrooms, but the group left him alone. We saw a shot of him from above, outside, kind of laying there. Later on, when all the women were going crazy, chasing Travis and like howling and acting like wild beasts, Shauna told him to go, and we saw him get up and run. Now, I think at that point, he just ran as far as he could because he was probably terrified. He was on drugs without realizing he was on drugs. The one person he trusted told him to run away, and he's either now lost, hurt, dead, afraid, but I don't know if we're going to get a resolution to this Javi is missing story anytime soon. I won't be surprised if he stays missing through season 2 in the 96 timeline. We see Travis is in the wilderness. He's looking for Javi. Nat wants to help. At first, Travis is like, no, fuck you. I don't want any help. And then he basically, you know, he tells her he got laid. She says she doesn't care what happened. They have a whole conversation, and she reminds him that the women were going to kill him. She asks if he's okay. Eventually, he does admit that he loves her, and they hug, and it's like a really sweet moment where they've finally gotten through all these struggles and these differences that have plagued their relationship for the entire season, and getting past his insecurities about her sexual experience and her sexual history. So maybe now that he slept with Jackie, he'll feel like they're more even-footed moving forward, and that'll help him get past that. I don't know. But there's obviously still a lot more to see with these two moving forward. In the 2021 timeline, we see Simone go back to the house that she shares with Taissa. So Ty is with all the people who have helped assist her in her campaign at this point. So we're seeing, these scenes are kind of juxtaposed of Simone back in their home, and Ty waiting to find out the news of whether she's won the Senate race or not. So Simone is doing the laundry. She hears like this whooshing sound from a grate, so she starts to investigate, and she sees that there's blood. She sees that there's a little bit, like a little passageway into a room, so she crawls in there. I'm thinking, girl, no. Like, hidden room in your house? Like, just wait for somebody to come over. Call a friend. But she goes in there, much braver than I would be, and she finds a secret room that we assume Taissa is the one who's been using. And in that room is an altar of sorts, or at least a table. And on the table are a number of candles, a super creepy doll with one arm missing and an eye missing, and also Biscuit's head. After looking for another couple seconds, I realized there's also, I think, a heart on the table, so probably also Biscuit's heart. A couple episodes ago, Taissa, when she confessed to Simone about the sleepwalking, and she said that she thought that she was the one who let Biscuit out. Well, she must have had some type of inkling that she did something to Biscuit, because here we now can see that she actually was the one who killed him. The episode began with 2021 Taissa in the tree. We talked about how there was a bite mark on her hand. Now, I thought at the time that she had bitten her own hand, but now it seems like that was probably a bite mark from Biscuit. So that was probably the night that she did kill and sacrifice Biscuit. So there's a lot of different directions we could go in here for an analysis on what the hell is up with Taissa, because this has been a big question throughout the entire season. We've been slowly getting answers like, yes, she is the woman in the tree. She has this alternate maybe personality where she eats dirt, or maybe she's just sleepwalking. It's all very unclear what's going on there. There's a lot of potential theories behind it. Could it be something like multiple personalities, dissociative identity disorder, or is it supernatural? Is she possessed by the spirit of something that was in that wilderness, that was in those woods with them? We have to wonder, like, of the 4 main women in the 2021 timeline, is Ty the most dangerous? I think it's a kind of a toss-up between, oh my god, I don't even know, but it's not Nat. It's definitely either Ty, Shauna, or Misty, but all 3 of them are seriously dangerous, and they're kind of living their lives looking like innocent, normal women, when really what they're capable of doing is actually profoundly evil and dark. So it's pretty startling when you think about it. This scene of Simone finding about Ty's alter, but also alternate personality potentially, is juxtaposed with Taissa finding out that she won the election. So now I have to ask myself, why did the show makers make that creative choice to show these things cut together? And I have to assume it's because these blood rituals, this practice that Taissa is doing with this alternate personality, in some way sealed the election for her. Now, obviously, this only makes sense if we're taking the interpretation of the show as having a supernatural element. If the women are just crazy, this doesn't make sense. So let's assume for a minute that there is a supernatural element at play, because the showrunners have left this up to interpretation the whole time. Now, I've seen a lot of people in my comments going hard on it's clearly supernatural, everyone's an idiot if they don't agree. And then I've seen other people also going in like, no, the women are all just going crazy from mutual stress and trauma and what they've been through. There's these 2 opposing schools of thought on really what's happening. It's supernatural versus psychological. So if we take the supernatural interpretation, then we might be able to infer that Taissa won the election through sacrificing Biscuit. Now, later in the episode, I'm going to talk about the significance of blood as it's been portrayed throughout this first season and what we could expect moving forward. But this goes back to this idea that blood has a powerful property in the lives of these women, both in the wilderness and after. And what blood can do apparently gives them power. So back in 96, we quickly see, Shauna considering whether to go outside and try to talk to Jackie about their fight, or to tell her to go inside, but instead she goes to sleep. This begins a sequence of, I guess, death visions from Jackie's point of view. So now, the first time I watched this, I actually thought that this was all from Shauna's perspective, but after a second viewing, it's definitely from Jackie's perspective. But as the viewers, it's a little unclear, because of course, we start thinking that this is all really happening. So in the visions, Shauna comes outside to where Jackie is sitting by the fire that she's created, even though in real life she never managed to start the fire. Shauna comes out, she apologizes, and tells her that she needs to come back inside. So Jackie comes back into the cabin. Everyone is standing there smiling. There's a warm fire blazing. Now you'll notice if you go back and rewatch, like it was a little blurry. So I think this is also an indicator that this was kind of like a dream sequence, because people don't look quite real. They wrap a blanket around her. Everyone is focused on Jackie. They're focused on helping her, warming her up, comforting her. Lottie kneels down and gives her hot chocolate, and there's this kind of like moment that Jackie's like, hot chocolate? How? And they're all like, does it even matter? And everyone's just looking at her lovingly. And Shauna says to her, it's fine. It's all going to be fine. I love you, Jackie. And then everyone else who's just standing there smiling choruses, we all love you, Jackie. And it's super creepy. And right away, as the viewer, we're all thinking, uh-oh, like this is for sure a dream or something. Like this is obviously not real. At that point, it became pretty obvious. But Jackie has not yet caught on to it. She thinks it is real. Then Shauna continues and she says, like, you know, you're the best friend I've ever had. You know that, right? And Jackie's like, I know. And she seems really happy, content. But then all of a sudden, we see her face change. And then when the camera angle shifts, we see why. It's because she's seen Laura Lee. Obviously, Jackie knows that Laura Lee is dead, so when she sees Laura Lee among the smiling faces, that causes her to stop and to start to reconsider the moment that she's in and the reality of the moment that she's in. And then Laura Lee says, it's not as bad as you thought, is it? So now as viewers, this is our first indicator that Jackie is dying, right? Laura Lee is saying to her, dying's not as bad as you thought it was, right? So Jackie also begins to realize something's wrong, and then, oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. She sees a figure in the corner. He's in the shadows. You could just make out this man's face. He looks like he's maybe mid to late 30s, early 40s, not that old. And he says, so glad you're joining us. We've been waiting for you. And then Jackie's face, she looks really upset, disturbed. In that moment, she knows that that beautiful vision she had of everyone smiling at her, giving her the attention she obviously desires, loving her, is not real. So obviously, we're all wondering, who the hell is that guy? It seems fairly obvious, as I said earlier, that he must be the owner of the cabin, the man who built that cabin, who lived there and who died there. He's younger than I expected. For some reason, I just assumed it was a really old guy. I don't know why I assumed that. But again, this calls back to the idea that the souls who are lost in this wilderness remain there. Now, in the morning, Shauna wakes up. She runs to the window. She seems to sense right away that something has happened. She sees the snow and she goes, no. She runs outside, and there's that shot that last week I had a screenshot. Now, I didn't know what it was of. I wish I had zoomed in and like analyzed it a little bit more, because I would have maybe been able to predict this one. But remember, I told you guys that some of the visions that Shauna had in the moment right before she stabbed Adam were things that we hadn't even seen yet in the 96 timeline. And this image of her digging up Jackie from the snow was one of those images. This is one of those horrible moments in her life that still as an adult she does remember, because she goes out, she tries to uncover Jackie. She's going, no, 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 no. And we see Jackie's face. She's obviously dead, frozen. In an early episode, one of them said it's going to be the kind of cold that that dying feels like falling asleep. That's essentially happened to Jackie, right? She just kind of fell asleep and just drifted off into death. We see Shauna. It's pretty heartbreaking. Obviously, she's going to have to deal with a lot of guilt over this. And she's going, no, Jackie, wake up, Jackie, no. And then eventually she just screams. Taissa's behind her, kind of trying to like hold her, trying to help comfort her through that horrible moment. We see the other girls and the coach looking on in horror, from in front of the cabin. They all know that they're complicit in this. None of them tried to bring Jackie back inside. None of them protested her going outside to sleep or staying out there, besides the coach. Even still, the coach really should have doubled down and insisted on her coming in. He is the only adult present. So now we're finally getting towards the end of the episode. We see that Nat has processed and is starting to accept the very real possibility that Travis did kill himself. She seems to think that they had this deal that neither of them were going to end their own lives, and he broke his end of the bargain, and now she's going to do the same. Or maybe she feels like without him, there's no reason to live. Without having the motive of uncovering the mystery behind his death, she has nothing else to live for. So she has a shotgun. She looks like she's about to, kill herself and end her own life because she's positioned the barrel of the shotgun right under her chin. And it seems like she's gearing herself up to pull the trigger when all of a sudden there's like bang, 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 bang on the door, and the door bursts open. This all happened so fast. Like, I tried to get screenshots, but I barely got any because the whole scene unfolded so fast that I couldn't even pause it and get the screenshots fast enough. But a group of people run in. They're all wearing kind of like a bluish gray, like sweatpants and sweatshirt type outfit. One guy whose face you see pretty clearly, he kind of walks in like this, and he's just kind of watching. He doesn't actually participate in grabbing that. He's just kind of watching it all go down, and then they zoom in, and he has a necklace on that has the symbol that's all over the forest. That symbol that we still have no idea what it means, but obviously it contains some significant meaning to the girl's time in the wilderness, and he is wearing that symbol. And the group, they put like a bag or something over Nat's head. They all grab her and they run out the door. She's kicking, screaming, yelling no. Nobody's around apparently to help, and they put her in the back of a van and drive off. This seems like a really well-organized like kidnapping. Like, it seems like this group is well-funded, well-organized. They've probably done this before. Obviously, they are followers of some type of cult of belief surrounding the experience of the Yellowjackets, which is why they have that symbol. And we could all assume who's in charge, which is probably Lottie. So right as Nat is being kidnapped and being taken out of that room, she gets a phone call from that woman, Suze, who was her sponsor and who she was like basically blackmailing into helping her look into Travis's bank account. And Suze basically says, "What the hell did you get me into? I think I'm being followed. Who is Lottie Matthews?" So Lottie is the person who is behind clearing Travis's bank account. We could assume Lottie is the person who is running this cult that has just kidnapped Natalie. And hey, Lottie's still alive, and we're probably going to get an adult counterpart for Lottie in season 2. So that's pretty cool, actually. I'm really looking forward to that. So that brings us to the question of Lottie and her cult following. As far as I'm concerned, Lottie thinks that tree trunk is some type of like portal to communicate with like spirits or the devil or the forest or something like that, because she seems to be using that tree trunk area as like a combination of a shrine to hang her bones on, and a place to pray, and a place to bring her blood offerings. So we're going to see more with that hollowed out trunk in season 2. I know it. You have to also wonder like which women are still alive and in Lottie's cult. So the very final scene of the episode is back in the 96 timeline. We see Lottie in front of the tree trunk. She puts the bare heart down, offering it up to either the gods or Satan or whoever she believes in at this point. We see behind her is Misty and Van. They have become her first 2 followers, which is super interesting. I think Van, the trauma of the wolf attack and her survival has given her a spiritual outlook that she didn't have before, and that's the thing that's kind of bonding her to Lottie at this point. Whereas for Misty, I think it's the way that the team is ready to turn on her because of the mushroom trip. It's just something for her to align herself with, and she always wants to be with someone. So I have to wonder which other women are still alive in the 2021 timeline, because the first girls to follow Lottie's cult were Van and Misty, but we could assume some of the other girls are going to kind of align themselves with Lottie as well, whereas others, we're probably going to see that divide start to take place at the beginning of season 2. So I wonder, are there other survivors who are still alive that we just haven't seen yet, who are going to come out and become influential characters in season 2 other than Lottie? I think it's very possible that we're going to see an adult version of Van as well, which I'm very excited to see what our girl Van has been up to all these years. Also seems like Lottie is probably the one who either orchestrated or is in some way responsible for Travis's death, or at least who may have been involved with clearing out his bank account. In that scene, at the very end, we hear Lottie say something in French. So I looked it up and I translated it, and what she's saying in French is "Spill blood, my friends." And then she says, "Let the darkness set us free." And on those words, the season ends. So season 2 is going to be wild, no question about it. I know some people were kind of disappointed that this episode wasn't as crazy as episode 9, but the penultimate episode of a season always is crazier than the finale. I feel like that's kind of par for the course and the norm. You can't follow up something as wild as episode 9 was with another crazy episode, right? You have to kind of bring things back together and start to set up for season 2 and what's moving forward. So I was not disappointed. Is this all supernatural, or is this all a tragic descent into like depravity due to trauma? That is going to be one of the biggest questions that I hope we get answered in season 2, because the showrunners have really towed the line, giving us enough evidence that it could be supernatural and just enough evidence that it could be, psychosis and trauma, that it's definitely unclear. It's definitely still up for debate. And, I am at this point leaning more towards supernatural because of the sacrifices and the offerings that we've seen, as well as the way that those sacrifices and offerings seem to result in good fortune and even in like food becoming available to the girls out in the wilderness. Some evidence that I've been kind of thinking about for like to support the idea that there is a supernatural element at play in the wilderness is that one, it started all with that seance with Lottie speaking French. In that scene, she was also talking about blood and the need to spill blood, and that something horrible would happen if blood was not spilled. It seems like there have been a couple blood rituals already. Lottie made herself bleed when she ran into the window, and then they were able to kill the deer and eat that. Travis, they did cut him a little bit, even though they didn't kill him, but they did release some of his blood, and then the bear came and sacrificed itself to them the very next day. And it seems like there's going to be some other stuff moving forward that shows that like when they offer blood, they're rewarded in some way, typically with food. We can also argue that there's been a blood ritual in 2021 that's resulted in Taissa winning her election, that it seemed like it was almost impossible that she had any chance of actually winning after her actions with murdering Biscuit, and it seems like she offered up his heart, displaying his head there. It's all very disturbing, but it's also very ritualistic, and it could be the reason why she was able to win the election. So I just don't know if Taissa has 2 completely alternate personalities. Like, is good Ty aware of what bad Ty's up to? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I hope we find out. Some more evidence that it could be supernatural elements at play are the fact that Lottie's visions have been coming true throughout the entire season, right? Craziness can't make you predict the future accurately, so that's a pretty strong one. Homegirl could predict the future. There's also Jackie's vision of Laura Lee and the dead guy still there in the cabin, which kind of supports the idea that like there are ghosts or spirits lingering about. There's Van's experiences in between life and death. And then I have to really ask, like, is Taissa possessed? Was Shauna possessed when she almost killed Travis? It seemed kind of like it, but again, it could have just been the shrooms. Is Ty possessed when she's eating dirt? We still don't know anything what that's about. So there's so many questions that we still have that could eventually add up to there being a supernatural force controlling some more than others, but controlling them nonetheless. There's less evidence that they've all just gone crazy, I think, although maybe I'm probably just missing a bunch of things, and I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments what I've missed. But, we did see early on that Lottie is off her meds, right? They made sure that we saw that, and that does, bring up the question of what has the result of that been. There's also the mushroom trip. So you could argue that none of that was supernatural. It was, everything that happened there was just the effects of a hallucinogenic drug. There's also the fact that we have underage girls who are dealing with trauma and grief. God only knows the different ways that type of thing can manifest itself in their behavior and their actions, their beliefs, even in possible visions. We also have always assumed since the beginning, since episode 1, that cannibalism was going to come into play. But now a lot of people are starting to question whether there will even be cannibalism in this series at all. I still hope that there is, to be honest. But it's possible that it's just blood rituals that are going to come into play and not actual cannibalism itself. So I saw somebody online talking about Mesoamerican blood rituals, so I decided to look that up. So I guess in some, tribal practices, there was ritual bloodletting, which was essentially seen as an offering to the gods, like nourishment for the gods, and that the gods would then reward people who offered blood with things like supernatural visions, good fortune, and things like that. I don't know if that's going to come into play in season 2, but it's definitely very interesting and something I'm going to look into more in the next year while we wait. There's also the fact that Lottie, when she's speaking French, she says, "Spill blood, my friends." So is she speaking on the behalf of like some type of supernatural entity on behalf of some ghost, maybe the ghost of that guy who lived in the cabin. Maybe he's giving them some type of advice for survival that he wasn't able to carry out himself. And then there is the title of this episode, this finale episode, Sick Transit Gloria Mundi. As a brand new fan, I immediately associated it with Sick Transit Gloria, Glory Fades. But then I Googled it and I saw that it is actually just a Latin phrase. Sick Transit Gloria Mundi translates to, thus passes the glory of the world. So, thus passes the glory of the world. It's a finale episode. That's fitting in and of itself, but the phrase has always been used figuratively to express a regretful recognition of when things come to an end. Like, I think we kind of have a common expression similar to that, which is like, all things must come to pass, or all good things must come to pass, right? It's kind of the same idea, like, thus passes the glory of the world, sic transit Gloria Mundi, all things must eventually come to an end. So this season has come to an end. Jackie's life has come to an end. And I think that the girls in the wilderness have come to an end as a united force, as a team. I believe that divide is about to take effect in season 2. And they've also come to the end of living within the constraints of society, because they've given themselves permission to survive through any means necessary, even through spilling blood. So there's still so much to talk about. I'll probably do a follow-up episode at some point just to get into some more details, get into the nitty-gritty, and unpack maybe some things from earlier in the season, because I bet you if I go back, or if any of us go back and rewatch those earlier episodes, that there's going to be more clues that we could pick up on that'll give us some ideas for what's going to happen moving forward. So that's it for this episode of Purple Vice. It's the last episode of this season, so I don't know what else I'm going to do next, but if you guys have anything in particular that you want to hear about, an episode or scene that you'd like to hear me break down or analyze, or a specific moment from this finale that I didn't touch upon, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I could do for you guys. But until then,